This is Radio Romania International. You are listening to our one-hour broadcast in English for listeners in Western Europe and Japan. We can also be heard on the internet at www.rri.ro Channel 1. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and other social media platforms. Our programs are also available on TuneIn and via satellite Eutelsat 16A on 11,512 MHz vertical polarization, azimuth 16 degrees east. Symbol rate 29,950 mega symbols per second. Standard DVB-S2, modulation 8 PSK, audio PID 510. We wish you good reception conditions.
Hello, I'm Lapana Rasmian with the news. The headlines. The Prime Minister Florin Kuciu says the authorities maintain the objective of having at least 1.2 million Romanians vaccinated by the end of March and 10.4 million by the end of September. The European Ombudsman has launched an investigation into the way in which the European Commission is managing the COVID-19 vaccine purchase contracts concluded with the pharmaceutical companies on behalf of the EU member states. And Romania is preparing to participate with a national stand in the Expo 2020 Dubai. As many as 830,000 people have registered until Saturday on the dedicated vaccination platform as part of the second stage of the vaccination campaign, which mainly includes the elderly and the people with chronic diseases, the disabled, and the employees of key sectors. The Prime Minister Florin Kuciu said that the authorities maintain the objective of having at least 1.2 million Romanians vaccinated with both doses by the end of March and 10.4 million by the end of September. He also stressed the importance of continuing to observe anti-coronavirus protection rules everywhere and at all times. Despite the recommendation of the Romanian Health Ministry, restrictions generated by COVID-19 will be partially lifted in Bucharest as of Monday, the Municipal Committee for Emergency Situations announced. Theaters, cinemas, restaurants, bars, cafes, and gambling halls will be able to operate, but at a capacity of maximum 30%. Official data made public on Saturday showed that 2,719 new COVID-19 cases have been identified in Romania following 26,700 tests made. Another 94 people have died from COVID-19. So far, more than 709,000 cases of COVID-19 have been reported in Romania, and about 90% of the patients have recovered. All persons reaching the U.S. by air will be required to present upon boarding a negative SARS-CoV-2 test or a documented testing that they have been infected but have recovered. The negative test should be made 72 hours, that is 3 days at the most, prior to reaching the U.S., the Romanian Foreign Ministry announced. The measure, which will apply to all people over the age of 2, including the U.S. citizens, permanent residents and citizens transiting the U.S., will take effect on January 26th. In another move, people in risk areas, including Romania, who travel to the Netherlands by air or sea, should present, starting on Saturday, a rapid test for the new coronavirus, made no later than 4 hours before departure. France will also require, as of Sunday at midnight, a negative PCR COVID-19 test that needs to be taken at a maximum of 72 hours before the trip. Exempted from the rule are road transporters and cross-border workers. The European Ombudsman, quoted by Reuters news agency, has announced the launch of an investigation into the way in which the European Commission is managing the contracts for the purchase of the COVID-19 vaccines, concluded with pharmaceutical companies on behalf of the EU member states. The EU has spent about 2.5 billion euros for down payments to buy about 2.3 billion doses of vaccine from 6 companies that have COVID-19 vaccines approved or in the experimental phase. The prices, delivery deadlines, and other important clauses in the contracts are kept secret The European Commission claiming that confidentiality is essential to obtain the best possible contractual conditions. However, the Ombudsman's inquiry concerns the European Commission's refusal to provide public access to those documents. The EU states have complained of insufficient vaccine deliveries and uncertain timelines. The Commissioner of the Romanian section for Expo 2020 Dubai, Ferdinand Nagy, paid a working visit to the United Arab Emirates between January 17th and 21st. He met with Sheikh Ahmed bin Zayed Al Maktoum, the chairman of the Expo Dubai 2020 Steering Committee. During the talks, the two stressed the importance of bilateral relations in the context of the Strategic Economic Partnership concluded in 2018. The Romanian official also had a meeting with Reem Al-Hashimi, Minister of State for International Cooperation, both expressing confidence that Romania's presence at Expo 2020 Dubai will attract both the interest of visitors and of the business environment. Romania will participate in the World Exhibition with a national pavilion entitled New Nature. Expo 2020 Dubai will have the theme Connecting Minds, Creating the Future, and will take place between October 1st, 2021, March 31st, 2022. More than 1,000 people were arrested by the riot police on Saturday in Russia during the demonstrations in favor of the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, according to the OVD Info NGO, which specializes in monitoring protest movements in the country. The crowd, numbering 10,000 people according to France Press and 40,000 according to Reuters, gathered in central Moscow, and journalists witnessed violent arrests and clashes between the police and the protesters. And that's the news.
Coming up next, The Week in Review.
Welcome to The Week in Review. I'm Ana Maria Popescu. Romania's coronavirus vaccination program reached its second phase last week. After a first stage targeting healthcare personnel, last Friday a second phase was initiated, focusing on the elderly and chronic patients regardless of age. Workers in key sectors will also receive vaccines at this point. The government subsequently added to these categories sea and river navigation personnel, diplomatic mission staff, athletes taking part in international competitions, as well as the homeless and the disabled. Under a new rule, 75% of the appointments available will be earmarked for chronic patients and the elderly, and only 25% for staff in key sectors. Across the country, there are about 300 immunization centers, giving some 30,000 vaccine doses a day. But the number is set to increase as the country receives more doses from Pfizer or Moderna. According to Prime Minister Florin Cățu, Romania has 2.5 million vaccine doses set aside until the end of March. But not everything is running smoothly, hence discontent among people and opposition MPs. Since its launch, the governmental platform designed for online appointments has run into technical problems, which is why those who tried to book a place were unable to enroll individually and had to resort to their family physicians or their employers. Similar solutions were used by people who do not own a computer, who lack basic computer skills and have no one to help them. Moreover, some chronic patients are not included in the records of the National Health Insurance Agency and had difficulties proving their status. There are also counties having already run out of vaccine doses. Romania's representative at the World Health Organization, Dr. Alexandru Rațila, a Social Democratic deputy, believes the flawed booking app and the inclusion in the second stage of categories that have not been properly prioritized may prevent the adequate vaccination of citizens. Meanwhile, EU leaders decided in an online meeting this Thursday not to close the Union's internal borders, but to introduce new travel restrictions in order to contain the spread of the virus and of its newer variants. The A number of social or professional categories once again took to the streets this week to protest the current right-of-centre government's handling of the pandemic that has severely impacted Romania's economy. Picketing the offices of the presidency, the government, various ministries, prefecture offices, or even political parties, Romanians voiced their discontent. Cartel Alpha, one of the country's largest trade unions, initiated protests on January 14th, which are scheduled to last until February the 28th. Their main demands include decent wages, fair pension benefits, high-quality public services, fair taxation, compliance with the law, and a restart to collective bargaining. According to Deputy Prime Minister Dan Barna, some of the demands can be solved in the forthcoming period. He explained, however, that there are also demands that must be seen in the context of an economy hit by a crisis and of a budget that must meet the 7% of GDP deficit target. The Social Democrats in opposition side with the unionists unhappy with salary decisions and argue that it is quite feasible to increase wages and pensions while at the same time staying within the deficit ceiling targeted by the Câțu cabinet. On January the 27th, the Social Democrats are to present an alternative budget bill. Meanwhile, the draft state budget has been analyzed by Prime Minister Florin Câțu, Deputy Prime Minister Dan Barna, Finance Minister Alexandru Nazare, and the Minister for European Funds, Cristian Ghină, who were once again invited to talks with President Klaus Iohannis. The budget bill may reach Parliament early next month. President Klaus Iohannis congratulated Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who were sworn in as the new President and Vice President of the United States on Wednesday. I'm confident that together we will continue to develop and strengthen our strategic partnership to the benefit of our peoples and to work in the true spirit of transatlantic values, Klaus Iohannis posted on Twitter. At the inauguration of the 46th President of the U.S., Romania was represented by Ambassador George Cristian Maior. In a news release, the Romanian embassy in Washington expresses confidence that during the new president's term in office, both parties will reaffirm their commitment to strengthening and developing the strategic partnership for the 21st century between Romania and the United States of America, signed a decade ago.
You are listening to Radio Romania International. Focus on Romania. World of Culture.
Hello, this is Daniel Bills on the microphone. Casa Radio Publishing House has added fresh titles, most of them launched in late 2020 during the International Book Fair Gaudamus, staged by Radio Romania. A collection entitled The Romanian Poetry Library has included a book and CD under the title There Was a Time When I Used to Tell You All, as well as an anthology of poetry by Emil Brumaru, one of Romania's most important and popular contemporary poets. Language is one of the main qualities of Brumaru's poetry, a ludic and complex poet exploiting like no other the huge potential of the Romanian vocabulary, says critic Marius Chivu. The poems included in this anthology were read by poet Emil Brumaru for Radio Romania in 2002 in a series of recordings made by journalist Emil Buruianu. The volume also includes an interview made by Eugen Lucan for Radio Romania Culture in 2001, texts signed by critics Cosmin Ciocloș and Bogdan Câțu, as well as writers Veronica D. Niculescu and Șerban Foarță, with graphic illustrations by Zamfira Zamfirescu. The Radio Prichimbel Radio Toddler collection, through which the Radio Publishing House has made available pages of great literature to children, read by the leading figures of radio theatre, has launched several audiobooks such as Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, The Extraordinary Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor, and The Humpbacked Horse. Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves is a graphic novel by Alexandru Ciubotariu, adjusted for radio by Marin Traian, a radio recording dating back to 1965 with several remarkable actors like Ștefan Mihailescu-Brăila, Nicolae Gărdescu, Mircea Constantinescu, Marian Hudac. The Extraordinary Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor has been graphically illustrated by Cristiana Călin, with a radio script signed by Marin Traian. The show was recorded by Radio Romania in 1969 with famous actor Fori Egele as Sinbad the Sailor. Also a graphic novel, The Humpbacked Horse, has benefited from illustrations by Octavian Curoșu, with a script by Victor Frunze after the famous Russian story. The CD includes a remarkable Radio Romania recording from 1964 with famous Romanian actors like Nicolae Gărdescu, Dumitru Furdui and Marin Moraru. Ligia Necula with the Casa Radio Publishing House has also told us about other fresh launches at the International Book Fair Gaudamus.
Avem, bineînțeles, colecția de spunem noi, Noapte Bună.
I will be talking about the star collection, as we call it, Good Night Children, to which we managed to add 2 more volumes. There are 2 volumes with 7 stories each, read by the most appreciated voices in the radio archive. You will hear in these audiobooks the voices of great Romanian actors such as Octavian Cotescu, Leopoldina Bălănuță, Ștefan Mihailescu-Brăila, Alexandrina Haliț and Liliana Tomescu. As many of our listeners already know, the actors in this collection are the ones who brought to life the unforgettable stories which the past generations used to listen to. But we are sure that we can all return to these fairy tales of the world, from India, China, Africa, Mongolia, Canada, Latvia, and so on. I would also like to mention the release of an audiobook which many of those who follow us were waiting for, Luceafărul, The Morning Star. This is a CD that I believe will bring joy to many readers and radio listeners, but also to theatre lovers. I could say that this release is quite an event because you will have the opportunity to listen to 3 actors from different generations who come up with various interpretations of the famous poem by Romania's greatest poet, Mihai Eminescu. These actors are George Vraca, Ion Caramitru and Ada Condeescu. I think that this audio book with various interpretations of the poem, Luceafărul, could be a tool for the teachers of Romanian language and literature. Ligia Necula also told us about the new releases and the music collections of Casa Radio publishers, namely Jazz Forum, Radio Romania Music, Performances Profile, Gallery Box, Masters of Choral Art.
Dacă tot am ocazia să vă povestesc despre lucrurile minunate.
Since we've already talked about the collections dedicated to children, I will first mention the anniversary album, Oh What Joy, which marks the 75th anniversary of the Radio Children's Choir. Imago Mundi Izvor, Cantemir, Enescu Brancusi is another new release in which the Imago Mundi Instrumental Ensemble brings together in a generous music album 3 CDs devoted to some outstanding personalities of the Romanian culture. We have also released a CD that includes famous pieces by Tchaikovsky and Dvorak, performed by Cristian Măcelaru and the National Radio Orchestra. Alexandru Tomescu returns to Casa Radio Publishers with a CD entitled Concerto, in which he performs Mozart, Saint-Saëns and Dvorak alongside the National Radio Orchestra conducted by Cristian Măcelaru and Tiberiu Soare. And since 2020 was the birth of a year, we dedicated to the composer a CD with the 5th and 7th symphonies performed by the National Radio Orchestra conducted by Horia Andreescu and Cristian Măcelaru. In the end, I will be talking about jazz, and I can say that the CD Night and Day, featuring Luisa Zain and the Radio Big Band conducted by Ionel Tudor, enjoyed great success, said Ligia Necula in the end of today's World of Culture.